Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Tracy Shilshi, and today we are turning our focus to the sports bodies of our country in the backdrop, of course, of the just concluded Rio Olympics. Silver medalist PV Sindhu took another victory lap today, swarmed by thousands of fans, reminiscent of the kind of reception only our cricketers get. So taking it from there, we're asking, is it time for India's sports bodies to think of adopting principles of the Justice Lodha Committee recommendations? Considering, of course, how the BCCI is showing reluctance to adopt those guidelines, it wouldn't be a surprise that sports bodies would fight against it as well. However, post-Rio and looking at the kind of indulgence that the sports fan in India is, of course, showing, is there pressure on sports federations to shake things up? Joining us on the debate this evening, we've got senior sports journalist Pradeep Magazine joining us here. And also on the phone line, we've got Lok Sabha MP Kirti Azad, also a former cricketer, joining us on the phone line. Mr. Azad, if I could come to you first, we will talk of course, the sports bodies, but currently, at least as far as the BCCI is concerned, they've slotted an AGM on the 21st of September, and they have, of course, not informed either the Chief Justice or the three-member panel. What is the hesitancy that we are seeing as far as the BCCI is concerned in regards to the Lodha Committee recommendations?
Well, I think there's a lot at stake for these usurpers of these associations. One, there's a lot of money that is involved. Secondly, I have always said that the BCCI is United Alliance, United in Corruption, Alliances for Positions. And that is the big point. The reason it can only happen in India, that you are challenging the judgment of a double bench where the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was sitting and gave this judgment. I think this is a fantastic judgment. This recommendation is for the betterment of BCCI. This is for the betterment of cricket. But unfortunately, they don't want to do it for simple reason. They lose power, they lose status, they lose their position. And that's it. They accepted it in the court, but outside, they simply want to challenge, and they're asking the Honorable Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to recuse. So all I can say is that these people don't want to change. And that's the most unfortunate part. That's the reason we have such bad showing in the Olympics, because, again, we have politicians there for ages. I fail to understand. I, as a sports person, don't have time to go and do any sporting activity or be involved with any association, because just one constituency of mine keeps me busy. So all I can say is that they just want to stick around. The best thing that could ever happen to BCCI was the Lodha Committee judgment. But unfortunately, they are contesting that, and they are asking the Honorable Chief Justice to recuse. What a sorry state of affairs.
They are, in fact, waiting for that review. Pradeep, I'll come to you. Let me just tell our viewers, we're also joined on the phone line by senior sports journalist Jaideep Ghosh as well. Jaideep, I'll come to you in a bit, but, Pradeep, talking about taking on from what Mr. Azad is saying, that is the main problem that we're seeing. A lot of politicians, their involvement, of course, in the BCCI, and that is the same case that we're seeing in various sports federations as well. We hardly see any sports persons in any of these federations. Is that a problem, which has been going on for ages? When is the time really that we need to shake things up?
Look, the time today is as good a time as it was earlier. But see, there was a sports bill also, which the last government wanted to pass. The last sports minister, Ajay,
yes,
who was in the Congress United Alliance, did make that brief bill, in which there were a lot of provisions which are in the Lodha Panel.
Okay.
For instance, age cap, for instance, tenure cap,
yeah,
and a lot of other clauses which would have made it more transparent and the bodies more accountable. That bill couldn't be passed in the cabinet for obvious reasons, because the cabinet had ministers who were part of various federations.
Yes.
Especially of cricket, because
yes,
the cricket was supposed to be under RTI in that bill. So they rejected it. Even if they had passed it, I doubt it would have gone through the parliament, because then there are opposition leaders who are part of various sports federations. They wouldn't have allowed this. So it's because of these politicians who do not want to, obviously they don't want to come under various provisions which will make them accountable. They are resisting implementation of certain guidelines, certain principles of governance, which I don't see any reason why they don't want to. And as far as cricket is concerned, I think the whole country should have expressed greater outrage at the fact that the BCCI said that the Chief Justice of India is biased.
Yes.
They have accused him of bias just because he has passed a judgment which goes against the individuals who are controlling the board. It does not go against the good governance principles.
Yes.
And to accuse a Chief Justice of bias without any reason is, I think, one of the greatest injustices or greatest affronts anybody or anyone can do to the to one of the main pillars of Indian democracy in a way.
Jaideep, coming to you, we are, of course, talking about the sports bodies currently. Yes, the Justice Lodha Committee recommendations, they've been going on the legal aspects of it, of course, we've been covering. But, in detail, we're talking about the sports bodies also, like I said, in the backdrop of Rio. And that's the time really when the national conscience, awakens in a sense as far as a sports person is concerned. We see, a person like O.P. Jaisha, for whatever reason, it's still not clear as to why she didn't get the water or the necessary items while running, whether she refused it or not. But the fact is she did faint. The fact is there was no one to look after her. And these are things which, come to our attention when it happens currently. But, perhaps a year down the line, we may forget these things. Is that another problem you see that perhaps the sports federations are just banking on? They think, it's something, you forget after a while and then life goes on.
Tracy, I think this is not a new thing, because I think the sports federations in India have historically been banking on this for the last at least 30, 40 years. I mean, what happens every time we have an Olympic Games or an Asian Games or one such quadrennial event coming up? You have a situation where everybody is up in arms about how we are going to send a team contingent. This person has to go, that athlete has to go, this guy has a quota, that guy has got the, the qualification mark which is reduced further and further till such time that he or she can actually clear that mark. And as regards our perception of Olympics or sports, I can challenge you. You can stand PV Sindhu in the middle of downtown Delhi 1 month from now in civil clothes and nobody will recognize her. So let's have a reality check regarding where we are. We as a population are a very niche population in terms of reactions, and this is what is working perfectly for the federation. And you have athletes who have covered, who have gone to 5, 6 Olympics, not cleared one round in any of them.
Yes.
And they're still going. And the entire reason is that they are forgotten during the Olympics, forget about after, and they can quietly do their thing and go back for the next one.
That's right. Also, Pradeep, one thing we've seen, at least as far as cricket is concerned, it may not be in a large quantity, but you do have former cricketers who are part of the body in some form or the other, at least as far as selection is concerned. In some way they are involved, even as coaches or something like that. But you don't really see, like now, of course, you've got Sourav Ganguly, you've got Sachin Tendulkar, perhaps a more representation that you're seeing. But you don't really see that, is it, in different federations? So do you think, in a sense, it also lies on the sports persons to take that initiative? What is really stopping them?
No, you see, it's not even other federations as far as selection goes. I think most of the federations, selections are done by former players. In cricket also, because it's more visible and there are more number of cricketers who are trying to get into the body, into the federation or into the cricket board. But there is, as I said, resistance of people who are non-sports persons. They do not want to lose their control over the body. They don't want players to get in and spoil their clout inside.
Yes.
Sportsmen would want to take the initiative, but it's very difficult for a sportsman to take initiative because, after all, he's reliant on the people who are governing him. Lodha Committee, in its recommendations, there is one of the key recommendations is that the apex body of the board, which will be run by 9 people, will also have 2 representatives of players, one from women and one from men. Both of them will form a cricketing body of a union kind of a thing, and that body will nominate one player to be part of running of the board.
Okay.
In other sports, it's even more impossible because nobody knows how they function. At least the board is under scrutiny all the time because we only write about cricket or talk
Yes,
about cricket.
that's true. Yeah.
So it's because of that scrutiny and because of the kind of money they have that these scandals surfaced. In other federations, as Jaideep was saying, once the Olympics is over, these 15 days, we will forget whether these federations exist or not, or who runs these federations. It's only at the time of an international event, especially at Olympics, we suddenly remember, oh, and that too we remember because we do so badly. We get embarrassed.
Yes.
And then we try to find reasons and they say, oh, who to blame, pick up these guys.
Yeah.
10 days later, 20 days later, I doubt we will be even talking about these Olympic disciplines.
Mr. Azad, if I could come to you, a lot of legal experts have been saying that as far as the Justice Lodha Committee recommendations go, a lot of it, the BCCI wouldn't even need to really look at it, or for that matter, the committee wouldn't even have needed to be set up if we did have a sports bill, like Mr. Pradeep has just mentioned, or a sports act, if you could call it. Where do we see ourselves as far as that's concerned? We do understand it's stuck in Parliament, but where do we see, do you see any kind of a movement towards that happening in the near future?
There was a conflict of interest when this National Sports Development Bill went to the Cabinet, passing and discussion taking place in Parliament regarding this. And there were so many people who were presidents of the various associations, who were cabinet ministers and ministers of states, that they were inside the Parliament and outside. I would say the Trojan horses in the Cabinet and outside the Cabinet. They were there. Talking about the recommendations not being followed for simple reason, as very rightly said by Pradeep, and I said it earlier, none of these guys actually know a thing about cricket. You ask them, what is weight of a cricket ball? Or what is the size of a football field? Or for that matter, what should be the size of a hockey stick? None of these guys can tell you. They won't know any technical things. There is no Ministry of Sports in the United States of America and many other countries who win medals.
Yes.
Are you aware of that? But we have it. The federations, when you try and talk to them and ask them to mend their ways, they would say we're autonomous bodies. But they will go back to the government for money. Now, when you were talking about selectors, just now we're talking about selectors, earlier, we used to have 5 selectors from 5 zones and they would be collecting a zonal Indian team because they would want to pick up boys from the various states. And they were mostly, many of them were selectors who hadn't played test cricket. So they would select certain players so that their president or their nominee is there in the state associations. And talking about sportsmen, as you said that why not many of them came in, I'll tell you, the legendary Bishan Singh Bedi, the former India captain, even contested against Mr. Arun Jaitley. And he lost it very badly. He just managed 135 votes. Because we did it as a symbolic fight. We know because there were proxy system, which has now been abolished, which was being misused with 40 members, 50 members in the houses of these people. Even Mr. Jaitley has about 10 members in his own house. And they would just collect proxies, get them signed. Many of them were unsigned, and they would simply submit it. So none of the cricketers ever got a chance to really speak. And we spoke about this corruption that was taking place in DDC and the BCCI. But today I'm suffering, and I just came back today. I had a defamation case against me by Hockey India. There's a defamation case against me by the DDCA, for I have done nothing. I have only raised the issue, which was reflected in the Justice Mudgil report and also on the Justice Lodha recommendations, where the judgment has come from the Chief Justice double bench. So all these things I've said, and yet I'm suffering, but I don't mind. I'm absolutely happy. But change must take place in sports, because sports persons don't belong to any caste, region, religion, or anything. They just belong to a
That's
team.
it. Yes.
They are simply emotional fools, and I'm one of them.
Mr. Bhat, K.N. Bhat, also a senior Supreme Court advocate, is joining us on the phone line. Mr. Bhat, I'd asked this question earlier to Mr. Azad as well. The AGM, BCCI AGM has been planned for the 21st of September. They've not informed the Chief Justice yes. So you're calling it the contempt of court?
Beg your pardon?
Mr. Bhat, okay, I'm sorry, that was Mr. Azad who said contempt of court. Do you agree with that, that the AGM is being slated for the 21st of September? However, they have not informed the panel or, for that matter, the Chief Justice as well, which supposedly they are to do because the review petition is still in Supreme Court, so they have to adhere by the rules.
I don't think that there is any contempt of court.
Okay.
There is ultimately, if they hold something against the directions of the court, then it will be held null and void. There is no contempt of court. I don't think so.
Where do you see this heading, sir? Where do you see it heading at the moment? Because we do see reluctance definitely on behalf of BCCI. They are, of course, fighting against the Lodha recommendations. Where do you see this heading?
It is expected, and the entry of Justice Kadjo is the clearest sign of their intention not to obey if possible. So there is no doubt about it, and nobody in the BCCI would like to give up their privileges, rights, and other things, and they will resist to the best their fullest ability. No doubt about it. So there is calling the AGM is not a contempt of court.
All right. Okay. That's what Mr. Bhat
It
is.
is. May I tell you why it is?
Okay, Mr. Azad, tell us why it is.
Just now, Cricket Association of Bengal and the Baroda Cricket Association wanted to hold elections, but they were asked by Justice Lodha not to hold these elections and come up with and also Jammu and Kashmir already held their elections, and they were told it is null and void. And all of them, BCCI has been warned that you can't have any elections till these recommendations are implemented. That is why it's a contempt of court. And the main petitioner, Aditya Verma, has gone to court. He has already filed an application there.
All right. Jaideep, if you're still with us on the phone line, is this something that you would see, ahead if at all there are any kind of an attempt to bring in such kind of recommendations for different sports bodies? Do you see this kind of legal hassles going on for years as well for each of these federations?
Oh, absolutely. See, there are a couple of things I'd like to point out here. First of all, this entire talk about involvement of sports persons in administration. Cricket had recently a couple of sports persons, apart from the ones mentioned here, who had gone in and, got elected for their state federation. But thereafter, I don't think they stood against the actual the BCCI office bearers for any kind of on a principle anyway. So that's enough. Number two is that we tend to have this whole thing about, horses for courses, specialized people for specialized portfolios, even in the ministry, in the cabinet. I don't think the people who are into sports or who are also into sports and politics now have ever said they are ready to take up the position of a sports minister. Because the sports ministry is unfortunately always handed down to the guy who is left without a portfolio at the end of the distribution. That essentially reflects how things are in sports in India.
Yes.
And as regards your question of these legalese, I think these state associations on other sports, barring cricket, are more liable for this kind of thing because they are run on the taxpayers' money essentially, directly or indirectly. Because the BCCI, whether it makes its money in the right way or the wrong way, doesn't take it from the government coffers. So I think, yeah, absolutely, they should be under some sort of microscope, and equally there will be insane amount of resistance to this and court cases by the dozen.
Okay. Pradeep, some of the view, I've been reading a few articles on how to revamp, sports federations in India. Some are of the view that perhaps we should have an independent sports regulator. Do you think that could help in some way? Or is that also a far-fetched dream, just like having recommendations like the Lodha Panel for various sports bodies?
Well, a lot of these things may be a far-fetched dream because the resistance comes from people who actually are legislators in India. They are the most powerful people. Even if you look at the board, even now the board is run by, the president of the board is a BJP's, I think, youth wing president. He's a powerful man in the party. A lot of these Congress and BJP MPs and ministers are part of the board, which they know they will have to relinquish their positions once Lodha committee is implemented. Similarly, they are part of other bodies. So that's why the resistance comes from there. And that is why what the Supreme Court has done, it's a landmark kind of a thing in India, because we thought that it will be difficult or impossible for the board to now not implement these recommendations, but they are still resisting. Let's see how far the fight goes.
Yes.
But there needs to be, you see, I don't think we need a sports ministry or a sports minister. What the government needs to do, because all Olympic sports federations are dependent on government for money.
Yes.
Because they don't get private companies or private investment does not come into sports apart from cricket, because they get returns there. So the sports ministry should be headed by, as you say, some kind of an independent regulator, somebody who knows sports, who's kind of a CEO, who is independent of these pressures and who sees that the money being spent, or whatever little money goes, it's not much. India doesn't spend much on sports. But whatever little it spends, it's spent properly, it's spent in the right direction. And whatever sports policies we formulate, the interest of sports in India is kept in mind,
Yes.
and not of some individuals.
Do you think sponsors also play a role on the very fact that cricketers do get so much attention, so much
See, cricket
money?
is a popular sport. It will get
yeah,
money. It is
yeah.
getting money because of its popularity. Generally, most of these Olympic sports anywhere in the world do not get that kind of a money like football does, or
Yes.
cricket does, or golf does, or tennis does. These are exceptions. It's the government which provides the money. Like Britain, who finished second at the medals table, which they have never done in their history, probably, I think.
Yes.
Or maybe once before. They were funded by their lottery. They have a lottery system, and a lot of that money which the government earned from lottery, they decided to fund their sports. So this is how the governments fund, they find ways to fund their sports. But the money which, when they give it to their federations or for development of sports, they see to it that it's properly spent.
The intention is right. Whether
Yeah,
you
intention
have
is
a
also
lot
right,
of money
and
or
its
little.
execution is also correct.
Yes. All right. Jaideep, if I could come to you again, I did ask Pradeep this question to you as well. Do we need to see more of involvement from sports persons as well? Do we need to see? We do have Gopi Chand, who has his own academy, and he's of course bringing out these stars from his academy. But do we see people like him also? Trying to get into federations, trying to, do we see that happening? Do we see tennis stars perhaps getting into, because all we see is that they open up these academies and they train these, these new upcoming talent, but we don't really see them getting involved in the nitty-gritty of things, which is where it's actually really required.
See, Tracy, it's like this, because like you have been discussing, like the gentlemen on the panel have been saying,
Yes.
the kind of resistance and opposition that comes in from the people who are in power. I mean, which guy would like to take up the cudgels and, offend everybody and antagonize the entire establishment, and then try to run his own academy? His academy will be locked down in 15 days flat. That is number one. Number two is that a lot of our sports persons, unfortunately, once they're done with the sport, are more interested in commercial, exploits of their being who they were, and using that for academies, for whatever else they might be doing. And ideally, of course, it should be absolutely, there should be no doubt that, people like Sebastian Coe and all are involved in the Olympic movement. I don't see any reason why our athletes and sports persons shouldn't be. But they are not politically connected. Most of them are not. There have been so many cases of our former sports persons having to sell their medals also. Equally, we have cases of people who are running academies, which is basically a commercial setup. If they really are put into the right places, they would work. But then they'll have to be given blanket clearance and blanket powers to run things, which I do not think is coming their way at any given stage.
All right. All right. We'll have to leave it there for the moment. What I can at least hope for is that if the BCCI does eventually have to agree to the Lodha panel recommendations, and if the big one really falls, perhaps the little ones would follow soon.
Yeah,
and that is really the hope that we can, hang on to for the moment. But thank you so much to all of you for joining me here on The Big Picture. Tomorrow, of course, we'll join you with a different topic. But for the moment, that's it from me.